Hi everybody, welcome to Eating Peace this week. A very interesting aspect of overeating, eating, really lots of different kinds of compulsions come out of a sense of rebellion or anger at being controlled, even if your own mind has been the one controlling you. But to follow a food plan or to follow some sort of pattern or decide you're not going to do something like smoke cigarettes anymore. And a sense then that happens in the mind of believing you're being controlled by an outside force, by a structure that is too intense for you, like being in prison, And when that feeling of rebellion becomes strong, of course, you want to break out of the prison and go smoke that cigarette or eat that food that you're never allowed to eat. Kind of like almost aggressive or sneak eating or hang it all, I don't care what the results or consequences are. I just want to be out of this burden, this heaviness of feeling like I'm being controlled by something outside of myself, like I'm in prison somewhere, like a diet mentality. That is a really tricky and difficult thing to watch, but not so hard if you've got inquiry. So I would say, first you can identify what do you think you'll have if you break out of whatever plan it is that you think you're on, right? In some ways, there's no way to ever know what's going to happen in 10 minutes or in an hour or later on today or the next day, but you can know that you're going to hold yourself in loving kindness at all times. And so therefore not overeat or stuff yourself or make yourself sick. But even if you do that, even if you wind up, maybe you're trying to do the best you can, of course. I mean, my approach here that I'm talking about, eating peace, is a mind that is peaceful, feelings that are open, and an approach towards ultimately that no matter what happens, I can be with it without necessarily overeating or hurting myself with food or eating. But I know that all of us are doing little testing and experiments and engaging in new things that we bump up against in life, and there we are with food, wondering about it again, having a new experience with food and eating. So I just wanted to talk about this concept of rebellion, if that's the thing that you wind up experiencing. So some people, if you're like me, you were told you need to control yourself and make sure that you don't ever binge or overeat again. When I first had that approach or that idea, yeah, that's right. That's absolutely true. I know I need to do that. And I controlled myself intensely for 2 years. I had a food plan. I weighed all my food. I went without and did some funny things if I couldn't find anything to eat. Maybe I went for a long period of time, hours over my scheduled meal plan, waiting to have the right kind of food. And I was just exceptionally rigid with food and eating. It did not feel like freedom when it came to food and eating, but I felt like it was the best I could do at the time compared to what I had been like before, which was wild, out of control, binge eating with a fury, and just being shocked almost at the inner feelings that I had that were so intense and so wild that would propel somebody to eat like that, and propel me to eat like that. It almost felt like something was coming in and taking over. And this was, at least I had the relief of that ending. But the rigidity was ridiculous for me. There was like a perfectionism in it that was so intense and like a dictator. And it almost made food and eating kind of more serious and critical. And I was thinking just as much about food, but staying on the plan as I had been when I was totally out of control. So there had to be some place in the middle. There had to be another way. And there was, thank goodness. There can be for you too. There can be for anybody. I mean, Food and eating is this really interesting balance. There's a middle way with it. It does not have to be like that. So the thing about breaking free of that rebellion is it was almost like a buildup for so long with putting on the brakes down a steep hill that when I actually decided to eat whatever I wanted, it was back to the frenzy thing. I remember vividly the time when I broke out of that long period of time of controlling the food that I ate and controlling myself and controlling my emotions and controlling everything about my life, really, not wanting to get too off balance, off kilter so that I would feel like eating. When that happened, I just, ate everything from one end of the street to the other. I mean, I was out just buying food and felt so tortured and so horrible. But it was like this kind of funny relief to rebel and not have to hold up that perfection anymore. And that was the beginning of the end of that extreme either side. Thank goodness. It took several years, though, to learn, to find the balance. Actually, quite a few years, if you really add it all up together. That binge out of a 2-year period of great rigidity happened quite early in my eating disorder career. It was like in the early 20s. And I still suffered and flip-flopped a lot all the way through the rest of my 20s and into my 30s in my mind. So my behavior wasn't so extreme anymore, and I got a lot of good therapy, but that helped calm me down. But I was still anxious, and I still felt rebellious about things. So I just wanted to let's take a look at if you find yourself feeling really anxious about a plan or some kind of structure or something offered to you that would provide this scaffolding to stand in. You may want to question it because there can be some at least a little bit of an offering of like the building that you might live in or a foundation of a plan that can help. Some people feel more comfortable and like more peaceful when they settle into here's what's okay for me, here's what's not really okay for me, and I'm fine with staying in the parameters of that. I'm not going to starve to death. All right, so rebellion. Let's talk about this rebellion. You feel like something else is forcing you or making you hold to a certain way. One way to explore that with inquiry in this inner life watching is to see what it is you think you're not going to get if you stay on a plan. What is it that you think you're not going to get? Now, my plan that I had was way too rigid. The actual plan was way too rigid. There were so many things eliminated that I could never taste or I wasn't allowed or that I thought would set me off into a wild, craze of eating. That wasn't actually true. So that was really good to just come back to some kind of balance. It's way too rigid for me. That wasn't required. That wasn't necessary. Ultimately, where I wanted to go was a very balanced place where I wasn't having to think about food all the time. That's what I really wanted. I don't want to think about food all the time and how I'm not supposed to be eating it or that I am eating it. Well, there was one thing that I recognized in the middle of all that huge sense of rebellion against plans and ideas and rigidity and just suggestions or advice that I got from other people was that I wasn't going to get to be free. I was going to be somehow very limited. But what did I think I was really going to miss or lose or not get to experience? What was the rebellion? What would the rebellion voice say? What do you think your rebellious voice has to say? It can be different for different people depending on the situation. And my rebellious voice at the time, it's kind of good that it came on and just broke down that whole extremely rigid period of time that was way too perfectionistic because then I could sort of start from scratch over again. It was painful and difficult, but I moved forward with a different sense of surrender in a way. So what do you think that rebellion, what does it have to say? Let's make friends with the rebellious voice. Because I found that if I open to that sense of rebellion and that kind of voice, and I'm not so against it like it's an enemy, maybe it has something to offer, and it doesn't mean I'm going to need to binge or stuff myself or overeat or even eat that thing. Like, let's say a typical thing people cut out of their diets because they realize it doesn't make them feel very good is sugar, for example. Some people really love the way they feel when they never eat sugar. And sugar's tricky because it's got so much, it's so refined, and there's so many things done to it chemically in a lot of the ways sugar's used in food, factory food and whatever. I don't know that much about it, but nutritionally, that it kind of, it invites people to start to crave more and get more involved with sugar and wanting sugar. Now, I don't have it cut out of my life. I have it, I enjoy having sugar. And actually anything, nothing's off limits, because that just works well in my mind as a balanced way. I'm open to tasting and being with any kind of food. But I do notice that I don't eat that much sugar. Sometimes I go many days without it. There's certain things I've noticed that I used to eat more of maybe for a little while that I discovered I actually don't know if I even like it that much. That particular kind of candy. I thought I loved it so much, and when I really sat with tasting and being with it, wow, I don't know if I really like it that much, which is kind of fun to discover. But so, rebellion, you can journal what this rebellious voice has to say. Almost give it a personality. Maybe you can even name that person, the rebellious one. Because that rebellious one has kind of a feisty manner of almost saying bluntly, maybe critically and maybe angrily, something that is of concern to you on the inside. There's some amazing change that can happen with rebellion, or some sort of invitation that can happen with rebellion. So instead of thinking, I hate my rebellion, I don't know what's wrong with me, I'm like a teenager, or this is going on forever and ever, I always rebel and I always blow the whole thing and I'm such a screw up, that has sort of this negative framework that prevents you from seeing the benefits of any kind of energy, including rebellious energy. So, or anger, or some of the things we're always against: hurt, anger, powerlessness, emptiness. So against those. Fear, I don't want to have any of those feelings, so I'm going to make sure I do everything I can to not feel that. So if we were in kind of opening up more and letting our teenage is that a word? Our rebel, the teenage rebel, come on in and sit down and have tea with it, ask it what it has to say, what kind of important benefits it might have. Why do you exist? Why did you show up? What do you think you're going to miss? What do you think you're going to lose? Because then you can identify some of these thoughts and wonder if they're actually true or not. So my rebel came in at the time that I'm mentioning in my first years of trying to heal this eating disorder that was underway. The rebel came in because it was such a fighter for absolute pure freedom. I did not want to believe that I couldn't be trusted ever. And so I had to have a really strict, detailed food plan. That was just what worked for me. It's okay for you to have a really detailed, strict food plan that works for you, because that might be your only way to see some sort of peace and to not be having your head right in the refrigerator, just eating constantly all the time. There's a place for that. Everybody's got their unique path and their unique movement. So not against that whatsoever. And that may be exactly what works for you. But I know that what my rebel was saying was it wanted to sort out what these feelings were deep within, to understand what food really meant to me and why I was doing it, and to find peace and freedom instead of the way I was being with food. So my rebel actually had a really amazing, beautiful voice. Now, the rebel that is willing to have me go down with the ship, like let's just kill it all, including her, or destroy myself by stuffing food in and overeating, that one we had to sort out because I didn't want to die, or be so miserable or be so filled with suffering. But anger can be an incredibly powerful, rebellious anger can be very, very helpful to look at. So just journal on what you think your anger is actually saying. What does it want? Where is it trying to draw an extremely strong boundary? What is its greatest desire? Why is it showing up in the moment? Sometimes it's got a lot of fear underneath it. If you break down anger, you see there's something you're really, really afraid of, and you can identify, I will not feel pleasure. I will never feel relaxation and enjoyable pleasure. That's what my rebel is believing. I will never enjoy food and taste and have the freedom to do that. I can't trust myself. That's such a harsh thought. I knew that I wanted to trust myself and my inherent ability as a human being to eat in balance. I think everybody's born with that. Nobody's missing it. Some people have a lot of trauma and stories that they're believing and running from very, very young. I sure did. That are so strong that it's hard to sort out where food and eating begins and ends versus just your feelings of panic and fear and anger and how that all works with it. It's like there needs to be some kind of soothing or some kind of way to get out of all that anger and fear. But here's what I thought with all this speaking about rebellion and anger and what it's showing up for. Here's a simple inquiry. Trying to bring things back to make them very, very simple, be helpful. It's like this rebellion, if I keep it, if I smash it down, I shouldn't be rebellious. I can't ever trust myself. Let's just go with that one. Cannot trust myself. Is that true? How do I react when I think that thought? I make sure to give myself tons of a to-do list, really intense structure. I treat myself like I'm in jail. I treat my feelings and my desires and my wants like they shouldn't be here, and I need to not listen to them. Who would I be without that story that I can't trust myself? Who would you be without that story? You can't ultimately trust yourself. Who would you actually be? What an amazing question. Who would I be if I couldn't believe that I'm unable to trust myself, that there's something missing, that I was born without the thing that's trustworthy when it comes to intake and outtake, in with food? It's a great contemplation. And to actually be able to sit with too. Doesn't mean I need to hurt myself and the rebel wins. If it's taking in so much food, it means you're just like, eating so much that you stuff yourself and you feel awful. That's not really in balance. That's being mean to yourself. That's not really worthy of trust. So I get that. But what is it that you think can't be trusted? maybe that's worthy of questioning. Maybe it can be trusted. Maybe there's some part of you that you're thinking is impossible to trust that actually has something important to say. And so that rebel or that rebellious nature, anger, just see if you really listened to it and you sat with it and you stayed with it, stayed steady with it instead of trying to get rid of it so quick. See what it has to say. There may be some amazing concepts that appear, or some people that have bothered you, or some situations that you think are really, really difficult that are worthy of inquiry. And if you get those cleared up and lightened up within, and you feel like you're safe enough, even with anger, you might find that it's okay that you feel really uncomfortable, angry, afraid, and actually the desire for food doesn't really come into it. So just to finish this one, this lovely inquirer had written this week and saying he was feeling so sad because he overate, and it was the first time in a while. So sad. And I said, well, what were you thinking before you overate? I was thinking about my divorce, my impending divorce, my estranged wife who's living across the country now. That has nothing to do with food and eating. And he knew it. He knew it right there. It was like feeling really hopeless, or urgency for comfort, or angry eating. Sometimes the actual eating when it's, you don't really want it, but there you are eating it and crunching on things hard. It's kind of got this angry energy to it. It's like an expression of a feeling. So who would you be if you didn't need to express that through food, through eating, through consuming something and taking it in and biting it and eating it? What if you could trust yourself to handle all your confused and mixed and upset feelings about a divorce? And you could actually identify the thinking that's going on, like, I'm not going to make it without being married anymore, or whatever it is that comes up for you. That person doesn't like me. I've been rejected. I don't know what my future is going to be like. Maybe you can question those thoughts and actually find that you can handle the strong feelings that are going on. Just stay with them. Stay with them. All right. That rebel can be a friend. It really can be. It can be somebody that's showing up with an important thing to say, and listening to it can help the whole entire system of needing a strong dictator versus the rebels that live in the hills, them not fighting anymore on the inside of you. Oh, what a relief. All right. Let me know how it goes. Start journaling about what you feel rebellious about and angry about, and answering the question, what does that mean? What do I think I'm going to miss? What's dangerous about this? Can I trust myself? I can trust myself. All right. Bye-bye.